Hello, my name is Philippe Goldin. I'm a professor here at the Irene Moore School of Nursing at the University of California, Davis, and I have the great honor to share a little bit about the science and practice of mindfulness and compassion with you. So usually, one thing that's very important is to fully arrive so that we can give our full attention and presence to the scientific story that I'm going to share with you. One key important takeaway from the practice of contemplative science and doing mindfulness and compassion meditation is connectivity. Connectivity could be within the brain, connectivity with other human beings, and perhaps even connectivity across people across the entire planet. This is an important theme about really embracing our interrelationships. The motivation here is to state the obvious that currently it's difficult to be a human being. We have angst, worry, stress. And the question is, how do we go from a mind that's fused with our anxiety, worries, to a mind that's illuminated, curious, open? And one of the ways is understanding that our human brain is plastic. And what we mean by that is that we have the great capacity to learn and to change the functional connectivity across brain networks by what we choose to do every single day. So this is a message of hope. So lots of the work that I've done has used different forms of meditation practice, different forms of psychotherapy like cognitive behavioral therapy, and also physical exercise as interventions for people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, stress, and looking into the brain, going under the hood, so to speak, of the skull and going directly into the brain to understand what's the brain behavioral mechanisms of these different ways of training the mind through meditation, psychotherapy, physical exercise. And as I mentioned, to really help people who are suffering from stress, depression, anxiety, even pain. Importantly, the goal is to reduce suffering, but also to optimize performance. How far can we really develop our capacity to be healthy, to be well, to be psychologically flexible? So another way of visualizing this is we have different mental states. So one mental state represented here is like a fly that's drawn to the sweet, sticky dew, and it gets stuck. So we have mental states that actually cause us to feel stuck in overlearned patterns. And one question is, how could we, and is it even possible to, develop the quality of a mind that is fluid, flexible, like this stream that's navigating through the forest? And the basic premise is that it is possible to develop our minds, our mental states, the quality of our thoughts, and to a sustainable wellness. How do we do this? So this is an important slide, so pay attention. The key thing that we humans suffer from are negative self-beliefs. How do we get from those negative self-beliefs that keep us constrained to a mind that is really more psychologically flexible? There are many techniques, contemplative practices, mindfulness meditation, compassion meditation, other forms of meditation are certain methods. And here is the key metaphor. It's like WD-40, a lock that a key is trying to move into, but it's all filled with grime and dirt. And this magical substance, WD-40, this set of chemicals, loosens up the grit just enough so that the key can fit. And then different parts of the brain that are related to emotion awareness, to emotion regulation, to flexible views of the self are now lubricated, so to speak, so that they can function in a healthy manner. And again, this is all happening in the cortex. 4 to 5 millimeters of cortex on the surface of the brain, where moment to moment there are billions of computations that make up who we are, how we navigate, what we feel, what we think, how we dream and imagine. So as I mentioned, one set of techniques fall under the category meditation. In Sanskrit, the word is bhavna, which literally means to plant seeds in the field. It's an agricultural metaphor. Here, in the context of training the mind, or thinking about this as a set of technologies or techniques, meditation refers to cultivating positive qualities of kindness, compassion, insight, attention regulation, emotion regulation, but also, importantly, to gain familiarity, even intimacy, or even insight into one's own mental processes. So we often think that this body and mind are the ultimate laboratory, and it doesn't cost a penny to do research in your own body-mind. So meditation techniques are one way to probe and to dive into this incredibly rich laboratory. John Kabat-Zinn, a PhD from MIT, molecular biology, many, many years ago, actually provided a definition of the word that's known in the West as mindfulness. He says, paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So for Westerners, the last part, non-judgmentally, is the most critical. Many times when people try to train their minds by whatever techniques, they start to say, I can't do this, I'm not skillful enough, I'm not persistent enough. But really, this is a kind of a set of qualities that can arise by training the mind. So when we say mindfulness practices, there are about 20 to 30 different kinds of mindfulness practices, a few of which have been studied through Western science, and many more remain unstudied. But there are several different examples, as you can see here, like mindful breathing, body scan meditation, loving kindness meditation, walking meditation, and so forth. And you see that some are concentration-based, some are physical or visceral, some are doing regular activities like walking or even eating. So just to point out that there are many different kinds of mindfulness practices, each of which serve a different purpose. And the goal overall, again, is to cultivate this present moment awareness in the present moment and non-judgmental acceptance of what one is experiencing from moment to moment. We know from about 20, 30 years of research in the West on different meditation practices, just briefly, that a regular meditation practice can literally help reduce symptoms of depression, of anxiety, of stress. We know that from different kinds of brain imaging studies that it can help with emotion awareness, being able to up and down regulate one's emotions from moment to moment using cognitive techniques, attention regulation techniques. We even know that different ailments of the heart, hypertension, etc., can literally be helped through sustained meditation practice. We also know through other studies that the immune system, like interleukin 6, 3, can actually be enhanced through different meditation practices. So even on the immune system level. And then, of course, more generally, well-being in terms of feeling connected, having more control of your physiology, feeling more connected with other people, and having a more positive sense of self. So there are many positive sequelae or outcomes related to sustained meditation practice. And there are many others that we'll be studying. The simplest way to think about a model for all of these different kinds of meditation practices that lead to kind of a more mature or fully developed sense of well-being, as you can see here, the model is actually this bird. They say that on the one side of the wing, there's insight, wisdom, understanding nature of reality, how things work. But that's not enough. On the other wing, there's compassion, caring, loving kindness towards other human beings and animals and even ecosystems. And the third quality in this model is skillful means, the behaviors that are infused and compelled by one's insight and compassion. So these three different capacities are interconnected to develop what we call as a fully mature, caring human being. So normally, this can be a practice as short as a moment. So even for a moment, just notice the next breath as you breathe in and breathe out. As you become more and more familiar, you can, in real time, take the mindfulness practice or different kinds of meditation practices on the road with you, anywhere you go. And as you become more and more skillful, you learn how to, in the moment, just shift your attention, awareness of the body, sensation, where you are. And this can be done anywhere, any place, in silence. So I like to show cartoons to help demonstrate or illuminate some of the qualities. So one way to think about what happens with sustained meditation practices or mindfulness practice is almost like this flagpole that is deeply inserted into the ground, stable, secure, solid. And the mind is like the flag that is very vulnerable and sensitive to the winds, the currents, that positive thoughts, negative thoughts, feeling happy, sad, bored. But that other part of the mind is stable, the flagpole. So no matter what kind of chaos is happening or disturbances, external or internal, you can always shift to this other part of the mind that is grounded to the earth, stable, secure. The more that one can develop this, you can be in any context and redirect your attention, your awareness. This is a very important, simple model that had a very powerful influence by Tang et al. And they're trying to understand what are some of the underlying mechanisms, like why does mindfulness meditation help? Well, in this model, what they suggest, and they have evidence for this, that sustained meditation practice can lead to enhanced ability to control your attention, to volitionally direct your attention. It can also lead to greater skill and confidence in being able to identify emotions and to regulate those emotions. And that can be increasing or decreasing different kinds of emotion. And the third quality is self-awareness, literally being able from moment to moment to understand and to relate to different qualities of how we are viewing ourselves. And all of these load onto what's called self-regulation, which essentially is one of the core cognitive psychological abilities to be well, to be balanced, to have a healthy relationship with yourself and with others. These three qualities, just briefly, have already begun to be mapped onto different brain regions. So we know that we can begin to probe the brain to identify to what extent and in what moments are people literally enhancing attention regulation, emotion regulation, self-awareness through different neuroimaging techniques. Another way to understand this is in terms of emotion and emotion regulation. So if you look at the blue box, there can be a moment where something is threatening, and that could be real or it could be imagined. It doesn't even have to be real, but it could be a memory, a thought, or a misunderstanding. And within milliseconds, the human brain has been sculpted via evolution to respond even before conscious awareness, to have an emotional reaction within milliseconds, to actually have fear or anxiety or arousal or a certain negative or positive shift in emotion state. That emotional reactivity across different brain regions is something that can be measured in using different techniques. We've never seen emotion directly, but we can infer through subjective experience, people's decision-making, through autonomic psychophysiology like heart rate changes, breathing changes, neural response, cognitive, or even how people are responding interpersonally. So we can infer different emotions. The core thing for us are these negative self-beliefs. And one way that psychologists have talked about this is this inner critic. And here's some examples. These very powerful beliefs that tend to be self-harming. I'm not worthy of love. I'm flawed. I must not make a mistake. I'm not okay the way I am. I'm not good enough. I must be perfect. So we actually use these negative self-beliefs as stimuli in different experiments to probe people's ability to regulate their emotion reactivity. So we did that in this case. And what you see here with the orange circles is one of the most robust findings in cognitive neuroscience, which essentially is the self-referential brain network that's distributed across these three brain regions when people are spinning on thinking and specifically negative self-beliefs. What you see in the black circle there is the amygdala, an important region for emotion awareness and emotion reactivity. So we can literally see when people are spinning on their own negative self-beliefs. But how to work with our emotional reactivity and our negative self-beliefs? This is the essential question for how to develop wellness. Well, emotion regulation is not new. In fact, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, almost 2,000 years ago, wrote a wonderful little book called Meditations. And if you can, find this book. It's pure cognitive behavioral therapy. And here's just one quote. If you're distressed by anything external or internal, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate, your evaluation of it. And this you have the power to revoke or to modify at any moment. This is pure, clear definition of emotion regulation. So here, as you've seen before, a threat activates in milliseconds emotion reactivity mechanisms in the brain that sends a bottom-up signal to more dorsal areas of the brain to activate cognitive regulation, attention regulation, brain networks, which then exerts a top-down influence to modify the current emotion reactivity, in some cases to increase it, its intensity, or to decrease it. In humans, like us, there are many other modules, like language, the inner self-talk network, that modifies the patterns of emotions and even emotion regulation capacity and ability, and also views of self. To what extent we hold positive or negative views of the self influence this emotion regulation ability. Here's just a little piece of evidence from one study that we did looking at 8 weeks of mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness meditation training in adults. And what you see here on the right in the black circle is the amygdala. And what we're looking at is amygdala activity. What I want you to see is that the dark bar is before 2 months of mindfulness training, and people are reacting or spinning on their own negative self-beliefs. And you see that black line increased activity in the amygdala when spinning on your negative self-beliefs. A cue comes on to shift attention to your breath. And you see that black line, which is an indication of brain activity decreasing, suggesting that shifting attention, even to the sensation of breath, begins to reduce the intensity of amygdala response. Now, fast forward to more than 2 months of meditation training, and what you see initially, this first circle, is we do the same exact task, but in this case, people are having an increased response in the amygdala when spinning on their own negative self-beliefs. Other labs and others have actually confirmed this finding. We don't become dampened, we actually become more emotionally aware, not less. But the second red circle is the key finding, that we can then come back down to baseline or even below within seconds. And this suggests that one of the effects of meditation training is to actually enhance that psychological flexibility, that WD-40 that I mentioned, and release from being stuck. So this is a very important neural demonstration of psychological flexibility that we can all develop. Another important network that I mentioned before was self-focused processing or self-referential processing. This is when we're literally thinking about ourselves or spinning or ruminating. And this is a network that is so fundamental, and it's one of the most powerful networks that we have found in cognitive neuroscience. But there are many other kinds of psychological functions or abilities that are embedded in the brain. So I mentioned about emotion, language, self-talk, views of self, but also the body, the visceral sensations influence what kind of the emotion regulation ability. reward processing when we see something that's pleasant or something that we find that's reinforcing, and even inhibitory control. So the point being that there are many human abilities or capacities that lead to sustainable wellness that we can actually probe in the brain. Also salience network, the ability to shift attention to what's important. And empathy, empathic resonance with other people. This is a very simple process model of attention training. So we often start with the breath because it's easy to recognize. And we try to sustain our attention on the breath. And then inevitably, we become distracted by a thought, a sound, an image, a memory. That is completely normal. The key point there is that we notice that we're distracted. And then we reorient our attention back to the focus, which in this case could be the breath. We do this again and again and again until it becomes almost second nature and much more fluid. So this model is one of the ways that you can train attention to actually support that psychological flexibility. Wonderful research has been done to try to identify the brain regions or the brain networks associated with distracted awareness, with reorienting of attention, with sustained attention. Just to point, and even with mind wandering, to show that the brain itself can actually show us what mental state a person is in. Going back to cartoons, because I think this is fun, we can ask the question, during my waking state, to what extent am I actually in the present moment, or is my mind spinning on the past, or spinning into the future? What has already happened or what has yet to happen? I'm sure if I had a really cool monitor on my head 24/7, you'd find that my mind is not on the present moment that much. But this is a trainable skill. So this is wonderful research. Again, another model suggesting, well, what happens when our attention is in the present moment? So some research has shown that optimal performance, be it with another person or a task or work that we're doing, is represented by that green vertical bar. Sadly, we spend a lot of time shifting to the left, where the mind is wandering almost effortlessly into thoughts, images, sensations, and we have to notice that. Or the mind can be spinning off to the right, where we begin to have mental fatigue after trying to assert our attention regulation. But the key thing here is, what does that optimal performance, that green bar, how does that actually feel like in your own body and mind? And this is one of the things that we need to figure out. When my mind is really present, honed in, refined, what does that actually feel like? And to become familiar with that state. This is a very important study that was done already, 14, 15 years ago, which was sampling people about 6 or 7 times across 2 or 3 days and asking, where is your mind in the moment? And this was a big sample of more than 2,250 people. And the sad thing is that, as you see here, 47% of the time when people were spontaneously pinged on their phone, they reported that their mind was not in the present moment. Their mind was wandering. I'm sure if we did that study now, it would be much higher than 47%. But the second thing is, where is your mind wandering? They asked. And most people, when they reported their mind was not on task, but actually wandering, they said that it was unpleasant. And hence the name of the paper was A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. So this is a very important understanding that when the untrained mind, that mind that is not trained in attention focus, tends to wander, and often to wander and spin on the negative. So how about on the biological level? Well, you can see here another friend of ours, Alyssa Eppel, at the University of California, San Francisco. She did a very nice study basically asking what happens in the telomeres, these caps on our chromosomes. If you think of shoelaces, there's a little plastic piece that keeps all the threads together. That's like the telomeres, the caps on our chromosomes. And then and the caps, when the caps begin to degrade over time, naturally, at some point when they degrade too much, then that chromosome unravels, and it's related to cell death. So what she essentially found was, in a large sample size in the Bay Area, that people who reported very high tendency to mind wander, the bar all the way to the right with a red circle, these are the people that had the shortest telomeres, meaning suggesting that there might be an association between the untrained mind that tends to wander a lot and greater reduction in the telomere caps on our chromosomes. That was a very important study. There are many different ways to train attention. It's just a couple of them here. Focused attention on a specific object. It could be the breath, it could be sound, it could be music, it could be sensation. There's also another form which has to do with open monitoring. No specific object, but opening the field of view and noticing, even for seconds or a minute, what's moving through the mind without any intention that there has to be a specific object. These are just two that have been studied in using Western scientific techniques. And here, just to point out that what's happening when we train the mind is you can go from a mind that's really wandering, this default mode network, on the left, the orange, and in the moment when a person applies attention regulation, you shift to the brain network on the right, which is attention regulation. And we are continuously shifting from the focused mind to mind wandering, focused mind to mind wandering. So we actually have the ability to regulate this mechanism. But there's also the body. There's more than just the brain and the mind. We have an incredible body. And this is a very elegant, beautiful study that came out, one of my favorite studies from Finland, again, with a couple thousand people, where they basically asked people to provide a body sensation topography or a map of where they feel sensations in their body for different emotional states. And as you can see here, the hot colors means much stronger. So you can see that we can differentiate love or anxiety, or that one picture of the body in the lower level, all blue, depressed. So the body can be used as a place to notice and become aware of different emotional states. So it's a continuous source of information. And again, we can train ourselves to become much more aware of our visceral sensations. The reason this is important, another amazing neuroscientist, Tanja Singer, who's at Leipzig, Max Planck Institute. She's done many studies, but in essence, what you're seeing on the right is a picture of the salience network. This is the network in the brain that is activated when we're paying attention to something that we deem important. It could be your pet, it could be your partner, it could be something at work. The point here is that the ability to enhance awareness of sensations in the body is associated with a greater or more refined emotion awareness, which is related to this salience network. This salience network then is related to empathy or empathic resonance with other people, which is a very important building block for compassion, the care for others. And I'm going to talk about compassion a little bit in a moment. And as you can see here, we might have a salience that is related to understanding or feeling our anxiety as opposed to suppressing or repressing. So that's one of the key takeaways from this set of findings, is that to actually feel the emotions, to be aware of the emotions, might actually become a platform to scaffold empathy and compassion for other people. So obviously compassion is very complex. There are many ways of thinking about it, listening to others, empathy, connecting, presence. One way that I like to define it is the following: I see you. Insight into the context, causes, the conditions that give rise to suffering, to pain, to confusion, to angst. Then having the courage to approach that experience rather than recoil or avoid. And then thirdly, understanding how to take motivated, skillful action in the world. These are three different facets of compassion: insight, courage to approach, and understanding. And these are all trainable and can be cultivated through intentional practice. But compassion, if our notion of compassion is that I have to be almost like an angel, then that sets the bar so high that it's almost impossible. And I know that I am not angelic. I do not have that total capacity. So it's very important how we think about compassion. On the other hand, we know that a person, even in the tour of duty, in the field of war, can drop into a moment of really caring and connecting with other people's suffering. And Pablo Casals, an amazing cellist, he provided this quote: "I feel the capacity to care is the thing which gives life its deepest significance." So in terms of wellness, sustainable, deep wellness, the ability to have empathy for others, to cultivate compassion, to recognize suffering and approach it, literally builds inner confidence and energy to sustain our connectivity, going back to the first slide, with other human beings. This is a very important clue. Compassion has also been defined as having cognitive components, like the awareness of the suffering of others, an affective or emotional component, sympathy, sympathetic concern related to being emotionally moved by the suffering of others, an intention or a wish to see the relief of that suffering, and a motivation to act, to help others be free from their suffering. So compassion is actually pretty complex, but also fascinating, and it's completely cultivatable. We can cultivate it. One of my favorite slides from Science from 1977, showing that little babies, even the first few months, have just enough neural architecture, enough neural matter in the brain and functional connectivity to notice the caregiver, to mimic the caregiver, in this case, the papa, the father, facial expressions, and to show it. And this literally is part of the social glue, that sense of connectivity between, in this case, father and child. And it activates all kinds of hormones and sense of interconnectivity. We know from other research that sometimes this is called the mirror neuron system that was first found across species and then within species in humans. And there's a neural basis for this ability to notice others, create a model of what others are doing and feeling, and then to demonstrate that. Again, Tanya Singer, one of my favorite neuroscientists, she's done excellent research showing that there are brain networks that are the basis for this perspective taking, the ability to drop the sense of self, and instead take the perspective of others. What are other people thinking, feeling? And then empathy, to actually create a model of what other people might be feeling in their body, their mind, in a way to have empathic resonance with others. So there's a wonderful neural basis that's, again, cultivatable, trainable. This image is a little bit more recent, but with neuroimaging tools, we can actually see that when two people are interacting, speaking, listening, if they are in attunement, their brain networks, their brain activity begins to become synchronized. A neurobiological marker that shows that two people can begin to actually have neural synchrony and be in attunement with each other. This is the brain representation of some of the feelings we have when we're with somebody that we really care for and feel safe with. So very exciting research. At Stanford, we created this 2-month-long program, Compassion Cultivation Training, that was contributed, that really relates to developing different kinds of compassion skills. I'm going to show you a little piece of data before we finish, which is we pinged people twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, for 10 weeks. And we asked them many questions. One question we asked: have you done anything kind or caring today for yourself or for another person? That was one question. Yes or no? And then, have you completed a formal meditation practice today? No or yes? And what we found, and this is very important, so this is twice a day, every day for about 10 weeks, we found that self-caring behavior, kind, caring behaviors towards oneself, was 6.5 times more likely to be reported if the person had meditated before we pinged them on their phone. Very interesting. Other caring behavior, kindness towards others, was also enhanced 3.5 times more likely to occur if the person had meditated. So this is showing kind of a nitty-gritty daily connectivity between even a formal meditation practice and then the manifestation of behavior that's kind towards others and self. Going back to the telomeres that I mentioned before, one very interesting study. This was showing 6 weeks of loving kindness meditation, one particular kind of compassion training. And the finding here, as you can see in the red circle, was that women, after 6 weeks of loving kindness meditation, their telomeres increased in size, which is protective, but not for the control group that did not do meditation. And also, interestingly, not for men. So there was a gender effect, a biological sex effect, that women really benefited from this practice, as demonstrated by the caps on their chromosomes. Again, only trust studies when they're replicated again and again in different labs. But this was a very fascinating meditation, mind, body, telomere, chromosome interaction. So to finish, one of my great heroes and one of my father's great heroes, Einstein, he wrote the following, which is very insightful and maybe a clue for us. A human being is part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. She or he experiences herself or himself, thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a type of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to a particular person or dimension or affection for just a few people. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison, this optical delusion, by widening our circle or scope of compassion to embrace all living beings and the whole of nature in its beauty. So this is the task for us, to develop profound, deep wellness. Thank you for your attention. I hope you are well.